Spencer, firstly, can you just advise us what the current position is with regard to the ownership of Farnborough Football Club?
At the moment, the shares are currently in my name. They'll be moved into my business company name as the investment has to go through correct business channels, but 100% of those shares are controlled by myself.
Okay, you said on BBC Radio London interview on Monday that you were depressed and angry at the position you found yourself in. Is this still the case, or have you mellowed over the last 48 hours?
Probably got worse. Had our first meeting on Monday afternoon, which went on for about 4 hours, and starting to look at the position of the club. And from a cash flow perspective, the club has some very serious problems. A number of those have been sorted out on Monday. The situation, it is what it is, and you can rant and rave about where you are, but you have to deal with the problem. So it's a case of, rather than shouting and accusing people of this, that and the other, just dealing with the problem as best we can.
Okay. Moving on to the club's debts, HMRC has now been cleared in full, I understand. Does the club have any other major debts, and if so, are there any repayment programmes in place for them?
It's too early to say at the moment. I've asked for a complete breakdown of where we are. As I said, it's only been a couple of days. We have two major debts that the club has, which one is to Green King the Brewery, and the other we have a mortgage with Hampshire Trust. Both of those are being looked at. There are some positive things going on, particularly with the brewery, which we have some possibilities that we will know about in the next couple of weeks. In contrast then, you have the unsecured creditors, of which I'm starting to look at. Overall, the debts of the club, because of the 900,000 of directors' loans at the moment we've parked to one side, the club is probably looking in the region of about 650,000 pounds worth of debt in total.
Do you feel that's appropriate for the level of club we're at and the size of the club?
I think that's one of the best positives about the club. I think it's very low. Obviously I'd rather the club was debt free, but with the club's turnover, which last year I understand was about 800,000, with increased revenue streams such as the kitchen restaurant that is being planned to be done as soon as possible, the club should have a turnover in the region of about 1.2 million. So debt ratio is actually the biggest positive about the football club. As a business, it's very low. However, that doesn't solve your problem of cash flow, which is a very serious problem.
Okay, moving on to cash flow and profitability. Simon was aiming to break even this year. Do you think we're going to be in a position to be able to do that?
It's far too early to say at the moment. Again, I'm sorry, it's been a couple of days, and it's also a case of looking at information and seeing what's real, what's really owed, what's not really owed. So at the moment it's too early to say, and if with the kitchen restaurant opening, that's a possibility, but I'm speaking to far too early and I'd be guessing at the moment.
Okay, are we, from a cash flow point of view, again, is it too early to understand whether with the debts cleared as they are from a day-to-day basis?
Well, no, we've only cleared HMRC and some very urgent creditors at the moment. I am not the White Knight. I don't have the money to put into the club on that basis. I'm not willing to put the money into the club on that basis. This was never the plan. So we have an awful lot of unsecured creditors, some of which are real, probably most of which are real, some of which perhaps are trying it on, and there are genuine reasons why they haven't been paid or that elements of their money is in dispute. The situation is that the club actually makes a profit, quite a substantial profit. However, when you add in the historic debts that the club's got, that impacts on the cash flow and causes the problems. So we have to work a plan forward very quickly to stop this problem.
Okay. Substantial monies, as you say, have been invested into the club. Is this going to be a loan to the company through a director's loan, or are the repayments going to start, or are you looking to get the money back when you actually come to sell?
Well, I come back to I'm not going to own this football club. So certainly in the long term. Ultimately, I haven't decided yet. It's too early. I'm certainly not gifting money to the football club. That's out of the question. I'm not in a position to do that. I certainly didn't come here to do that. And as I said before, I'm quite angry about the position that I've been put in. I had no chance to do due diligence because as it started I was going to be the manager, and then we had the situation with the trustee in bankruptcy, and it all happened in the space of 36 hours. So due diligence was really not possible. It was a case of buyer beware. I was aware of the position I could be put in, which is the position I now find myself. However, the simple fact is it has now passed from me just being the manager to as such owning the football club. So I have responsibilities to my banks and partners, and the reality to that is that that money will have to be returned when the club is sold, absolutely no question, and there will be returns on that. We're certainly not going to be taking any repayments from the club because the club simply can't afford it. So we will do our very best, I will do my very best, but it's a very desperate position from cash flow, there's no doubt at all.
Okay, you mentioned there was bankruptcy a real option, or not an option, a real possibility when you actually came into the club then?
Well, obviously I had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
I was there at the very death. What I was told, and I can certainly say, is that the day that the trustee accepted the bit of the money that I lent the board, I personally paid a couple of bills that day to keep the club trading. If the club isn't stocked with alcohol, etc., then the income stop and the club may or may not have gone into administration or liquidation. I don't know. It's a situation which never arose, but it was incredibly desperate, and monies were paid that day to keep the club trading.
When did you actually find out what the true level? Was that literally just the last couple of weeks?
I still don't know.
Okay.
I came in on Monday. It was a very bad 4 hours because an awful lot of bills have been put in front of us. I said the vast majority, I'm sure, are genuine. There's a few that aren't. And again, we're going to have to work through that. I was never planned to be the owner of the football club. If this was a normal business, we would have gone through a proper period of due diligence. That wasn't an opportunity that we had. And therefore now we are going through the due diligence. There was a risk. However, I think it's right to say that these numbers of £900,000 that were paid for the shares is totally inaccurate. I've certainly never said that. The purchase of the shares included the directors' loans. So again, depending on what the accountants come up with, those loans have either been quashed or are much smaller now, and considerably smaller. So the club is in a much better financial position from its balance sheet. So it is a positive from that, but I can certainly assure you there was no £900,000 been paid. I don't know where that's come from. There was a substantial payment made to purchase the shares and those loans, but it was absolutely nowhere near the figure of £900,000.
Okay, given the current financial position as we've talked about, what works are going to carry on at the ground? Is it going to be stopped? Obviously you're talking
Very
about
little. Because of the meeting I had on Monday and the position the club is in, starting with HMRC, it's just totally and utterly not appropriate, and I certainly don't have the funds to be funding expansion plans. The only works that will be done are to either make positions safe or to bring in income. So in a few weeks we will look very carefully at finishing the kitchen, because it's going to bring in income, but certainly further expansions certainly at the moment are not possible. However, I will say there are some very positive talks going on. I will say it's with Green King, and if something can be done on that basis, then hopefully we can get the stand, the roof on the stand, which would be fantastic, and finish some other bits and pieces.
Okay. In the interview on Monday, it was mentioned that the main sticking point for the new consortium was the managerial managerial contract. Can you comment on that?
Well, it's fact. Tim O'Shea's consortium made a bid that was acceptable from the finances, but obviously a lot of legals had to be done, and they offered me a 2.5-year contract. I didn't ask for it, they offered it to me, which was acceptable. The problem is it's not as straightforward as being made out. I don't take any money from Farnborough. I wasn't taking any money when I was offered the managerial job, and I'm sure that was part of the attraction to reduce the budget. But if the contract stated that if I was to be sacked at any point, they were going to pay compensation for sacking me. After all, I've left another job to come here, and I'm also loaning the club money, keeping the club afloat. The big problem is that we couldn't agree on what that figure would be if I was sacked, and ultimately I wasn't going to sell the club for exactly what we paid for it, for me to be left, having done all this, left another club, and get absolutely nothing for the purpose. There would have just been no sense in it. So they agreed, offered a compensation package which certainly wasn't acceptable. The bigger problem though was from a legal perspective. If I had a managerial contract that I wasn't being paid for, and again I wasn't taking the money except, I quote, in exceptional circumstances, for instance my death, that it would be paid to an estate. If they were to sack me, I would have been liable for the new manager's wages, because they would have said they'd sacked me and brought in a new manager that they'd had to pay. So ultimately I could sell the club, get sacked, and end up having to pay 30, 40, 50,000 pounds a year for the new manager, which was totally and utterly unacceptable. So to have criticism labelled at me that I turned down a bid because of my managerial contract is just a total nonsense. On top of which, it had to be dealt with. We were out of time. It's gone on and on. We've parted amicably with Justin Barnes and his Tin Moshe consortium. These bills had to be paid. There was a transfer embargo on. HMRC, I believe, and as a board, they believed were about to put a winding up petition in. Bills weren't being paid anywhere. The staff couldn't be paid. The wages couldn't be paid. And it had gone on long enough. So ultimately I did have to protect the substantial amount of money that I lent the directors. So I was really left with no choice. I also had other creditors that I'd spoken to, and it was really the only dealings I'd had with the management of the club in the first few weeks, and they made it clear they would prefer to deal with me. So there really was next to no choice. Now, saying all of that, this is totally not for me, and we are spending money right now getting the club's books in the correct order, looking at the situation the club is in to prepare it for sale, which a contract was signed on Friday evening for the club to be sold, to be available for sale. And I very much hope that the club will find a new buyer, whether it's a person or a company, as soon as possible, which I hope I can work with. But if they turn around and say we don't want you and come to some compensation package, I'll go elsewhere, and I'm confident in my ability that I'd get another job. So the right thing has been done, because ultimately we had no choice. So, and I don't like the criticisms that are aimed at me. If I wanted to buy the football club, why didn't I just buy it? And I made it very clear at my previous club 6 months ago that I wasn't owning Chertsey Town. So if I didn't want to own Chertsey Town, I certainly didn't want to own Farnborough. I'm just here to manage, and I hope that I can have some good results on the pitch over the coming seasons. So this has been forced on me. It's the last thing I want at the moment. I can't afford it at the moment. My company can't afford it at the moment. But we'll do it until a better proposition comes about, which I hope will be as soon as possible, and certainly before next season, so that we can set the correct budgets for the players.
Okay, I mean, if there are any potential lottery winners out there, what sort of figure are we looking at?
I don't think they need to be lottery winners. This is a fantastic proposition. As I said earlier, the club has got a fantastic stadium. The infrastructure of the club is very good. The debt ratio is incredibly good. There's opportunities to expand here from the commercial aspects under the stand. Expanding, we've got planning permission to extend the platinum lounges, the kitchens. So the club has got potential to make an awful lot of money just as a business, never mind a trophy as a football club. It's important we stay in the Conference South. But the club has got fantastic fans, it's got history. So the opportunity is very attractive from a financial number. Yes, the club has some debts, as I said, but as I said, with the context of what its turnover is and what its profitability is, it is a very attractive proposition for somebody. So we're pretty confident, having spoken at length now with Turners, Butler and Turners, that that a buyer will be found. We're not going to ask anything particularly stupid. It's a case it'll go as a going concern. It's got its negatives, it's got an awful lot of positives, and I'm sure somebody will do very well with it.
Okay,